claims come out about UFO sightings from high-ranking sources. Well, now an investigative journalist who has researched and reported on UFOs for more than 2 decades now says the Russian military engaged with UAPs dozens of times, even chasing them and shooting at them. This comes in the aftermath, of course, of this week's historic congressional UFO hearing that saw whistleblower David Grush testify that the U.S. has been aware of non-human activity for nearly a century.
Do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years.
Why is it that you refer to the phenomenon as non-human intelligence? Why deviate from the basis of extraterrestrial life?
I think the phenomenon is very complex, and I like to leave an open mind analytically to specific origin.
So the Pentagon has denied Grush's claims. But tonight, NewsNation has learned that investigative reporter George Knapp, who attended this hearing, has submitted a statement to Congress about Russian military engagements with UAPs decades ago. Of course, we want to bring in NewsNation senior national correspondent Brian Enton, who's been tracking this for several weeks now. Before we get into the details of this letter, who is George Knapp? What is his level of experience? What do we know about him?
So George Knapp is a highly respected investigative journalist. You can actually see him in some of that video sitting right behind David Grush to the left of him. And he's been studying UFOs for literally decades. He actually works for our parent company. He works for the NewsNation station in Las Vegas. He's been reporting on UFOs for years. He's been in touch with lawmakers for years. But what's interesting about these new developments with him is this is information that he submitted to the Congressional Committee on the record. He submitted these letters to the committee under oath, essentially. So these are now part of the congressional record. So it's not like this is just some blog post or some story that's out there. This is now part of this committee's congressional record.
So what does this letter actually say? Because probably the most shocking allegation is he talks about dozens of engagements between the Russian military and UAPs.
Yeah, it's pretty shocking. I've been going over it. This just came out after the hearing on Wednesday. So this is new in just the last couple of days. He says, according to people in Russia who he met with, a program director there, they had a whole UFO program that they talked to him about that was going on in the 90s. A man named Boris Sokolov was in charge of the program, said there had been 45 different incidents where the Russians had engaged with UFOs. The warplanes even chased them, shot at them. And he claims that the Russians told him that there was actually a time where 2 warplanes crashed during these encounters and 2 pilots were killed, which is unbelievable that they've been able to keep this secret for so long.
What is the kind of time frame on these encounters that we're talking about?
So he met with them in the 90s. There was a brief window, he says, where relations were good between the U.S. and Russia, where he was able to meet with some of these people who were in charge of the program and actually get some of this information.
What does he say about the American military's, relationship with UFOs, encounters with UFOs?
Similar thing. I mean, he says that this has been going on for years. He had a very close relationship with former Senator Harry Reid, that went back decades, where he says they worked together. There was a secret program that no one knew about that Harry Reid helped get funded. Tens of millions of dollars each year went into this program, and that the UFOs have been studied for years and just no one knew about it.
Yeah, you extensively covered this week's UAP hearing. What comes next?
It's a very good question. It's something we're going to talk a lot about in the special tonight. I mean, this really is just sort of the tip of the iceberg, as you might say. I mean, there are already more hearings planned. And again, just the fact that since the hearing, more information is coming out on the record, like these letters that we obtained from George Knapp with Russia. I mean, there's new stuff coming out every single day. So I think we're just really at the beginning of this whole process.
I know you're going to be breaking down more details of this letter and also hosting a roundtable in that special tonight on the UAP hearing. That starts at 9 p.m. Eastern.
Of the hearing from Wednesday. But when you talk about the nuclear site, there's so much that didn't come out. It seems like this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Very much so. We're going to start. I would hope that Speaker McCarthy, and I would hope that the American public would contact their legislators and say, hey, or congressional legislators and their senators, say this is something of a serious nature. We want to know what the heck's going on, and why are y'all covering it up? And why do we keep funding a Pentagon that loses over $1 billion a year, that has never passed an audit, yet they're coming to us now, whispering in some members here, hey, we need to study this. We need to get ahead of this. Send us more money, when in fact they've been asleep at the switch and not Well, they haven't been asleep at the switch. They know exactly what's going on. And
So they're already asking for more money?
Public.
They're already asking for more money after the hearings?
Why, sure. They've already started. Well, look at Chuck Schumer's bill. That's going to cost money. I don't know how much, but that's going to cost money. I've said all along, NASA, Pentagon, all of our Department of Defense, turn loose your files. Quit sending us these redacted files that look like a piece of Swiss cheese, like somebody shot it with a 12-gauge shotgun. Yeah. You can't make out heads or tails, maybe the date, and that's about it on it. And they don't, it just continued to be covered up. The legislation I had that just said, if you're a commercial airline pilot and you are going to send a report to the FAA about an anomalous sighting or a UFO or what have you, that report would be sent to Congress. Yet it was blocked by the intelligence community. These people that do not have an elected, they're not elected, they're appointed. They're sitting behind some desk over there at the Pentagon or somewhere, and they're making the decisions, and they're laughing at us. They're laughing at us because they know we don't. Listen, I'm the only one I've heard in Congress. There's a couple of us, Jim Jordan, myself, and some others that have said, Luna and Gates. We've all said that we need to get to the bottom of what's going on with the Pentagon. But at some point we got to cut off their money.
Yeah, I thought this was interesting, Congressman. One of the things that seems to have struck a nerve with people on both sides of the aisle, we don't see agreement a lot, but it is with this, is the possibility of this secret government program and the money. Where are the funds coming from? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, someone that you don't normally agree with, she spoke out on Wednesday. Also, she then went on social media very concerned about who's funding these programs. I want to play what she said on social media, and then we'll talk about it.
Do I think something is going on? Yes. There were specific defense contractors named. There were programs that were being abused that were named. And do I think there are grounds to pull on that thread further? Yes, I do. And I think that it should be pulled further. Do I know what it is? No. Am I going to be a hater? No. But I'm always interested in corruption and cover-ups. Like, that's my thing.
I saw your tweet this morning, Congressman, where you retweeted that and you said your friend was onto something, that there's something shady going on. You got a lot of heat from some of your constituents calling her your friend, but it is interesting that you guys have agreement on this issue.
Yeah, we've been buddies. We both came to Congress at the same time. I call her Cortez. She calls me Burchett. We're fine. I don't care. I'm not going to go to New York City and get her beat. She's sure as heck going to come to East Tennessee and get me beat. And so we're friends, and it's a good relationship, And I was encouraged by her line of questioning. As if you saw my second or third line of questionings, I just went down that list and I got down to the point of where that exactly is what's going on. They are hiding money or what have you. It's unchecked money. They're overcharging people for stuff, and they're using that money for something else. And what the hell they're using it for? Well, I'll tell you, it's covering up the biggest issue that will face us in our lifetime, and that is there life out there, and do we know about it?
Bold claims come out about UFO sightings from high-ranking sources. Now, a longtime investigative journalist saying that Russian military had dozens of interactions with UAPs, chasing them, even firing at them. The shocking claims coming from investigative reporter George Knapp in the form of a statement submitted directly to Congress. Knapp also claims the UFOs retreated at unbelievable speeds and, quote, may have incredible capacity for retaliation. We want to bring in Nick Pope now, who investigated UFOs while working for the British government. It's good to see you in person. Thank you for being here.
Thanks.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your background? In what capacity did you work for the British government, and what were you tasked with investigating for them?
Well, I was a civilian employee at the Ministry of Defence, so the UK equivalent of the DoD, and I worked there for 21 years. But for much of the early 90s, I was assigned to a division where my duties were looking at the UFO phenomenon, researching the entirety of it, but investigating the individual cases and assessing the defence implications for the UK.
And how did you what was your opinion walking away from this job in terms of the national security risk that UAPs pose?
I came away, I went in open-minded, but, I was like, come on.
Yeah.
I came out, I was like, wow. It is a defense and national security issue. And there's even an equation that defines threat, and it's capability times intent. Well, the UAP capability seems to be really impressive.
Yeah.
The intent, unknown.
Yeah. Can we talk about this recent revelation with George Knapp, alleging that Russia had dozens of encounters with UAPs, chasing them, even firing at them? What is the credibility of the source, in your opinion, and what do you make of this letter?
Yeah, I've seen it. It's really interesting. And I think one of the original sources is Boris Sokolov, who I met some years ago. And he was very immersed in the Russian government's program. We at the Ministry of Defense knew that the Russians had a program. We know the Chinese have a program. I think this is really good. The key point about this is it's put back onto the agenda the fact that this is a global phenomenon. We've been talking, obviously, about it's been very US-centric. And a lot of people all around the world watching these stories are saying, well, what about us? This is important to say. These sightings happen everywhere.
I'm really interested in that idea because it sort of seems like unless we are just not privy to high-level conversations that are happening between nations about this, countries have been largely siloed about this information. At what point, and do you hope there will be more international cooperation going forward?
Well, some years ago, there was talk of the United Nations taking a role in this. But frankly, I had some discussions and they didn't really want that. The real problem is that you can do that at an unclassified level. But the moment you get to the really interesting stuff, it's all classified.
Sure.
And clearly, there won't be information sharing there.
Knapp also claimed that high-ranking U.S. military officers consider UFOs to be serious business. And he's one of many accusing the military and the government of knowing a whole lot more than they're letting on. Can you personally attest to that being true?
I think there's always more than you disclose in public. It was the Ministry of Defense policy for years to downplay, deny and debunk all this. Now, we in the UK didn't have a spaceship in a hangar, as someone like David Grush has alleged, but we've got a lot of good stuff.
Yeah. What is the most interesting thing? I mean, I'm sure you have read many things that would turn our hair white and be very shocking to the layperson. What did you find personally most interesting during the hearing this week? And what do you think still needs to be done? What needs to happen next?
Well, it is, of course, the implications that we have not just craft, but bodies. I mean, this biologics. So we need to know about that. And that's interesting because we've heard a lot from theoretical physicists and engineers. Now I'd like to hear from some biologists and geneticists about all this. And I think what happens next, more hearings, Congress tries to validate the claims, and of course NASA's study reports next month.
I appreciate that, and I think there's sort of a Venn diagram of Americans who are particularly interested in what's going on right now. There are the people who've always been interested in UAPs and UFO sightings, and then there are those who are just pushing for government transparency, and they're interested in how our government works and our relationship with them. Are you of the opinion that Americans have a right to all of the classified information that the government has about this? Or do you think that there does need to be more of a drip release that doesn't cause mass hysteria?
I think we can be more open, but usually when information is classified, there are good reasons for that. And it's because things could be weaponized, because we don't want an adversary getting hands on it. So I think I'd like to see more out there, but let's not just blindly say, okay, give them everything.
Sure. Okay. Nick Pope, I appreciate your time and expertise. Thank you.
Recent interest in UFOs that led to the hearings, it is our next guest, investigative journalist Ross Coulthart, who broke the David Grush story right here on NewsNation about 2 months ago. Ross joins us live now. It's always good to see you, Ross. First of all, I know you've got sources in Congress. What are your sources saying about the possibility of another UFO hearing?
Yes, well, good evening, Brian. Look, they're concerned. At the moment, we've got great momentum with what's been achieved with the hearing. There's significant media interest, and it's refreshing and quite lovely to see the bipartisan approach being made by different politicians on both sides of the House. But what I'm hearing is that for a public hearing to take place, which is a very different proposition from the private hearings in secure or sensitive compartmented information facilities, SCIFs, that have been taking place for the last 2 years, in order for that kind of public hearing to take place, an inquisitorial hearing where people are subpoenaed, called before a public committee and asked to give evidence under oath, including, hopefully, first-hand witnesses from the legacy program, it really does require the Senate Intelligence Committee, and particularly Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, the senator from New York, to step up and heed growing public opinion on this issue. I'm pretty confident she's certainly motivated to do that, but I'm aware that there's a significant pushback going on at the moment from the Defense Department and sections of the intelligence community who, frankly, do not want the sterilizing disinfectant of sunlight shone on some of the issues that we're talking about.
Yeah, tell me about this pushback, because it sounds like when you talk to Burchett or others, they say this is just the beginning, we're going to have more hearings. I mean, what are you hearing from your sources about the pushback? How does that work?
Well, Brian, as you'd know, David Grush has raised very serious allegations of possible criminality, certainly illegality, certainly misappropriation, if not fraudulent behaviour with government funds. The allegation is that essentially the wool has been pulled over the eye of Congress, that there have been lies told to oversight committees, that even potentially presidents have been misled. It really doesn't get much more serious than this. And that's why people like AOC, Tim Burchett, even Senator Marco Rubio are talking on both sides of the House about the importance of accountability, of restoring Congress's transparency and control and oversight over these programs, if they are real, to make sure that they fully comply with the congressional requirements. And the difficulty is there are people who are obviously responsible for this, who are presumably at very high positions in both the defence and intelligence community, and who also are very influential inside some of our biggest aerospace contractors. I've just had a conversation this morning with somebody who approached me on behalf of a witness, a potential witness from within the legacy program, somebody who purports to have direct knowledge of the very same program that David Grush is talking about. And they're asking my advice about how to approach. And frankly, one of the issues at the moment is that the Pentagon's UFO UAP investigation office, ARRO, it's sending out a shocking signal. It doesn't have a phone number. It doesn't have an email address. It doesn't even have a website. And its Twitter page hasn't posted a tweet since the very first tweet it posted last year.
It's a really good point.
If this truly is an agency inside the Pentagon that's seriously interested in proactively investigating and hearing from witnesses, it's not sending that message out. And so I'm in the dilemma at the moment. Where do I send these poor people? And I'm encouraging them to consider going forward to either the Inspector General of the Intelligence Community or the Inspector General of the Defence Force, or to, frankly, just come forward to the Senate Intelligence Committee with the evidence they have. Because I have to say, not a lot of people have a lot of faith in the current body that the Pentagon has entrusted and that Congress has mandated to do these kind of investigations.
Yeah, and we know that that firsthand whistleblowers are coming forward. I mean, David Grush mentioned it in his testimony that there was someone else with firsthand knowledge of a crash retrieval program who did go to the Inspector General with a document with testimony of what they saw. So there is more to come. Ross, incredible reporting. Thank you so much for coming on with us tonight. We'll talk to you soon.
A real pleasure.
And Ben Hansen, also former FBI agent, now also investigates sightings. I want to start with you, Nick. You know, I've got a lot of friends and family who have been following our coverage for the last couple months who just say, look, like, until I can see the evidence for myself, until I can see pictures, they don't believe just, hearing people's stories.
I get that. I mean, I feel the same. But I mean, still, even in these days of forensics and DNA evidence, eyewitness testimony still lies at the heart of the criminal justice system. So we can, we must listen to that. But yeah, Congress is working to try and validate this. I was intrigued in the hearing where David Grush was very specific. And when he was asked, who do we need to get in the room? Who do we need to ask? Whether they're in agencies, corporations. He said, I will give you a list of hostile and friendly witnesses.
That was a good question.
It was a great question. Yeah. And he said he will do it after the hearing. I would love to see that list because that will tell us where to look for these programs.
Yep, and I've asked myself over and over again, I mean, why would these guys lie? I mean, with their history, top military officials, it just doesn't make sense that they would just suddenly make all this up. I want to play a soundbite from the David Grush interview he did with us initially. Something that was kind of alarming when he talks about the potential that these UAPs could actually be aggressive. We'll listen to it and then we'll talk about it.
I've been told that there have been attempts to bring down craft, that we've acted offensively against non-human craft.
There have been instances, and there are certain techniques.
Have human beings been hurt or killed by a non-human intelligence?
While I can't get into the specifics because that would reveal certain U.S. classified operations, I was briefed by a few individuals on the program that there were malevolent events like that.
I mean, Ben, that's scary to hear. I mean,
yeah,
it's scary. Like, you almost don't want it to be true. I mean, is this something we've known? I mean, you've been studying this for a long time, long before me. Is this something that we've known about?
Well, the problem is a lot of this is rumored that we can't document. And so if David Grush has information, it's going to be spectacular. But we can go back as far as what we call the red alert in D.C. in 52, right? 2 weekends over July, these objects would show up and then scatter when they'd scramble jets. I have information I can't verify yet, but that we actually lost a jet that night. Now, even if they're not shooting them down, this is very dangerous. It's no game when you scramble jets, in a sortie to go after something because you're flying extreme speeds. That alone is dangerous. Right now, we're talking about that they might have actually been shot down. Burchett said he saw something that made him feel as if they had the weaponry to turn us into, I think he said, briquettes, or charcoal.
Yeah.
Right? So that automatically should make this a very serious issue. We need to know what the intentions of whoever they are.
What's this nuclear incident, Nick, that we hear people talking about? Was there an incident in a nuclear plant? The congressman kind of alluded to it.
It's long been claimed that there's a connection between UFOs and nuclear weapons, and there have been a series of incidents where there have been sightings over nuclear power plants, missile silos and such like. And one of them in Malmstrom Air Force Base in 1967, a number of the missiles, when there was a UFO over the facility, apparently went offline. Well, whatever we think caused that, there will be a paper trail. And that's why it's so important. I mean, we heard questions about the Department of Energy. That's why it's important they're looped into this. It's also important that we get this information declassified. And of course, that's one of the things going forward that's going to be in Chuck Schumer's amendment to the new defense bill.
That's what I thought. I just brought this letter out again from George Knapp, which he put into the congressional record. He talks about this advanced weapons system application program. It's this secret program that apparently Harry Reid knew about. And he's saying, like, go back and get all those documents now, like that these Congress people need to go back and get the documents. I'm curious, Ben, you've been at a pilots conference essentially in Wisconsin for the last several days talking to pilots. We had you on Banfield a couple of nights. What have you learned from me? Are more pilots coming forward with stories?
Absolutely. So I got there Wednesday, so right after the hearings happened in the morning. And we had a booth, and we had a line of people, several people deep. Every 5 minutes, I was getting reports from people, and some of them really extraordinary. I'm talking about stuff that I'm going to be talking to Ryan Graves this week. I'm going to be talking, hopefully, to Burchett. People that might become whistleblowers because some of these happened while they're on Navy ships. Some of these things happened with commercial pilots. Really extraordinary. I just need some time to vet the information because it's like drinking from a fire hose. Witnesses.
What do you make of, Nick, this new information that came out of George Knapp's letter involving Russia? I mean, that really takes it to the next level, that they've had 40-some encounters, that they actually had a UFO shut down and a missile base at one point. Really alarming stuff.
Yeah, it's a timely reminder that this is a global phenomenon, and certainly Russia had and still has a program looking at this. China has a program looking at it. The UK, of course, where I worked. I mean, I'm intrigued. There are missiles being shut down. There are missiles being put into their pre-launch sequence. Most disturbing, well, almost as disturbing, these shoot-downs or these attempted shoot-downs. I've heard 3 previous stories, but not from Russia. One actually from the UK of aircraft ordered to shoot down. The UFO moved off. One from Iran, where the actual aircraft systems were disabled, and one from Peru where he did shoot at the thing, and he said the rounds were hit it but got absorbed. So fascinated to hear that there are Russian cases too.
It's interesting. The head of ARROW, which is the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, the people who are supposed to be investigating UFOs, they apparently didn't like the way they came across during this hearing. And Dr. Kirkpatrick, who is the head of ARROW, put out a personal statement. It wasn't a statement officially through the government. It was actually on his LinkedIn, which was kind of interesting. Put this personal letter. I want to read you a part of it because he seemed very, very upset about the hearing. He said, "I am deeply disappointed at the denigration of ARROW's dedicated men and women hailing from the Department of Defense, intelligence community, and civil partners who are pouring their hearts out working this issue on behalf of Congress. Finally, to be clear, ARROW has yet to find any credible evidence to support the allegations of any reverse engineering program for non-human technology." I mean, it seems like he was personally offended by what the witnesses said. What do you make of it?
Absolutely. I mean, we've been following this for a couple of days now, and I'm trying to play devil's advocate because I do think at heart Kirkpatrick is doing the best he knows how, right? But you have to remember he came out a couple months ago with co-authoring a paper with Avi Loeb, the Harvard professor, right? Mainstream media took that, a lot of them, and said the headline was, Harvard professor and director of ARROW claim that there's a mothership possibly orbiting Earth. That was not at all what the premise of the paper was. And so that was his initiation into this. And so now he feels like this is basically an ex parte hearing, so the other party's not present, and they say some things. He felt offended. I don't know what is in his mind, but I think he spoke out of defense. And so now they're walking it back.
Just don't know that it was a good look coming right out of those hearings.
It's not.
It was we got to go to a quick break. We've got a lot more to discuss over the next
If everyone could see the sensor and video data I witnessed, our national conversation would change. I urge us to put aside stigma and address the security and safety issue this topic represents. If UAP are foreign drones, it is an urgent national security problem. If it is something else, it is an issue for science.
It takes a lot of bravery to come forward, especially as a member of the military, and speak publicly about seeing a UFO. Our next guest, Ryan Graves, testified at Wednesday's hearings. You saw him there about what he saw while piloting an F-18, and he's been instrumental in encouraging other pilots to speak out. Ryan joins me live now. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, Ryan. I'm curious, it's been a few days since the hearings. Pilots feel comfortable coming to you and your organization. Have you seen an increase in people coming forward with stories? Have you heard anything especially interesting in the last couple of days?
Absolutely, you're correct. So yeah, since the hearing, there have been an influx of people coming to safeaerospace.org and joining both as pilots, as people just want to support this conversation. And a lot of those pilots have shared their stories. There have been a number of commercial pilots that have recently signed up that have been confirming some of the sightings that I spoke about, as well as sharing some new data about potentially some new cases. So we certainly have a work cut out for us.
An interesting development since the hearings, Ryan, is the ARROW head, Dr. Kirkpatrick, coming forward with this statement that I just read a couple of minutes ago, really not happy about the hearings, calling out David Grush. Did that surprise you? What did you make of that? Like, here's the statement again, saying that he was deeply disappointed. Were you surprised to see him come out with that statement on his LinkedIn?
Well, disappointed to see him come out that way. I would be disappointed to hear if he thought that hearing in any way was a slight on any of the men or women that were serving under ARROW or that he's worked with. I don't think anyone would speak poorly to any of that staff. I think there is perhaps justification for calling out improvement to the Office of ARROW or their processes that they've demonstrated thus far. So I hope that message got through clearly.
I'm just curious. You've been outspoken. You've done a lot of interviews over the years. What did it feel like, testifying there in Congress? Did it feel, I mean, you've told the story many times, but did it feel different being under oath and on the record? I mean, it was obviously just such a historic moment.
It's very difficult to describe it. It was quite the experience, even just from the moment we, opened the back doors and came out. I honestly kind of lost my breath for a moment. But, sitting there, it was something that I had spoken to before. And for me, it was a story that I had considered for a while, and it was nothing but the truth. So for me to be under oath in a way was almost empowering, that I could show people that I was being as honest as I felt.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt Gaetz, you heard him talk about a UAP incident at Eglin Air Force Base, that he saw a radar image, now wants that image to be released, is asking for a subpoena to force them to release that image. Does that sound at all like what you saw? What do you make of Representative Gaetz' story about what happened at the base there?
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting. It actually did remind me very much of the fleet of objects that was seen in the vicinity of the gimbal incident. That was something that wasn't seen on the FLIR footage, but was seen on the radar data on the situational awareness page, and you can hear the pilot speak to it. Well, when Representative Gaetz spoke to that particular incident in Florida, it reminded me of the same incident. What was even more interesting is just how positive the congressman was that what he had seen an image was not ours.
One thing I wondered too, I heard David Grush say over and over again, there was confidential information that he could only talk about with them in a skiff, in a confidential environment. Is there stuff that you know and saw that you're not able to talk about, or because it was sort of a firsthand account when you were piloting the F-18, it's all just open to the public?
When I first testified to my case and I spoke about it behind closed door, there was classified information relating to our weapons and sensor ranges that would be considered classified now. However, there would be no information related to UAP or related to the security classification guidelines, or defined through the security classification guidelines specifically for UAP themselves. So I was never read into any classified UAP program or anything like that, like Mr. Grush's experience.
Makes sense. Well, Ryan, we really appreciate you coming on tonight. It was really something to see you testifying on Wednesday. Hopefully you've gotten a little bit of rest, although it seems like you work all the time. Thanks so much for coming on with us tonight.
Thanks, Brian.